In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Today's guest is someone I am very excited to speak with. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, technologist, and leader in data operations and innovation. His first venture in the mobile app monetization space was successfully acquired in 2012. He also worked at NVIDIA in its earlier days, responsible for exploring innovation and new product direction, which sounds fascinating, especially knowing where NVIDIA is today. His current venture is recognized as a Gartner Cool Vendor and is rated the #1 data integration tool in customer reviews. He is the co-founder and CEO of Nexla. Saket Saurabh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Natalie. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And I know we're talking about driving major change and leading through key moments in a company. So I wanted to start by asking you about a topic that I know has reshaped your own business and is also top of mind for many of us leaders today, really talking about generative AI. And when ChatGPT first released a couple of years ago, especially given your expertise in data management and how you harness that across organizations, would love to hear from you. Like, what do you recall about when ChatGPT first released? Like, how did you think about what that would mean for your organization, and what kind of things have you learned along the way?
Yeah, very happy to share that actually. And having been in the data space and with my past work at NVIDIA, having worked on building some early machine learning algorithms at my previous startup, which was in the advertising marketing space, I had seen AI come into hype a few times in the past. But I can certainly say that the way ChatGPT came in and the impact that it showed and the wow that it created was certainly unprecedented. And I think even today, 2 years later, we're all still very wowed by that and amazed at the kind of applications that are getting built. So for me, it was an amazing time to see that, and then also to start rethinking, what it means for the entire industry, what it means for us as a company, and how the world will change in the next 3, 5, 10 years, and the role that we should be playing as a company in that.
Yeah, yeah. And can you talk about how you approached this? It sounds like there was kind of looking internally into your own business and then how to support clients. So, what was your thought process and what did you tackle?
Yeah, no, that's the fascinating thing about working in data is that data is the raw material that goes into AI. But at the same time, we know that AI can actually make many applications a lot simpler or a lot more powerful, for example. So in our case, it was, well, AI could make our own product better, but we can also make AI better if we can deliver the data to the applications that people are building with AI. So for us, it was both sided. And as I said, um, on the data side, when I looked at it, it was very clear that the technology is amazing. And we, as a company that serve large enterprises, would like to take advantage of that. But immediately there were questions about, well, how does this technology work with our information? We have so much information in our enterprise, right? So, for example, we see a lot of customers in asset management industry or wealth management industry, and there's so much material, documents, and so on. So the question came up like, how will it work for companies with their information, and how will it be done securely? Because not only is this technology very powerful, it to some extent for most people works in mysterious ways. And there's a little bit of an unknown about it. You might ask the same question and get slightly different answers on different occasions. So both aspects played, and for us, bringing the technology into our own product has been quite a bit of wow for our customers because data is complicated. Our product enables companies to build data pipelines, get data in the right place, make the data into the right shape and form so that they can use it. Well, that work is not always straightforward, and AI simplifying it, making it more accessible to people making it possible for non-developers to work with data in more complex scenarios is also really a big part, because ultimately my goal has always been, how do we enable everybody to become a data user and be achieving their fullest professional potential by taking advantage of data.
Mhm. Yeah. Can you talk about the process for getting your team kind of up to speed or excited? Like, was everyone pretty excited given your line of work? Was there any resistance? How did you work through that?
Everyone was excited. I think that was true, not just in our company, but broadly. But with excitement also comes a little bit of like, okay, what does it mean for us? Is that a good thing, or is that going to create new challenges, right? Um, the approach that at least I took for me as a product person, as a technologist and entrepreneur, is always to myself go dive into the technology a bit and try to understand, what is it about, how does it work, what are the strengths, where are some of the challenges. So my approach to this was to spend more time, and fortunately in today's world there's so much material available, from simple YouTube tutorials all the way to papers being published in this space at a very, very rapid pace. So we took into that, and that approach helped us kind of identify, like, the technology is powerful, and this is how we can approach that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I was talking to someone a day or two ago that was talking about the kind of different personas in an organization with AI adoption. And he was saying his experience was there's pilots and there's passengers. And that sometimes it's
Yeah.
been surprising for him. Kind of some of the people that became kind of that pilot role that maybe weren't in that kind of regard previously. I'm wondering if you've had any of that kind of experience in your company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I myself, I'm a pilot actually in real life. And love to try to understand how things work. And um, I think once I understand how things work, it helps me to then translate it to people. And sure enough, in our company, the same thing. There are, people who want to understand, which is true across the board. So, for example, somebody in sales could be like, "Hey, what does this mean?" And how do we take advantage of the technology, but not necessarily, um, you know, um, being comfortable with exploring on their own. And as the pilots in the company, we ended up doing a lot of educational material and tutorials, and I actually post very regularly about this topic, trying to simplify into pieces, for people, like, um, how does generative AI work, how do you take advantage of that with your own data, what are the techniques that are coming, what are the challenges people are facing, and so on, and try to be using that material to also educate our own team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting journey for organizations. I know, for our company, there's like for my own leadership was thinking of
Hmm.
what it looks like for our organization and our internal operations, what it looks like for the field of marketing, and how can we kind of make the work kind of better, faster, et cetera, today, as well as where's the industry headed. But then also like my own day to day. And I would say I'm still undergoing a transformation, but
Hmm.
very different if I would have looked back, from where I was 6 months ago, a year and a half ago, as far as how I use it, how much I use it, the different kind of tools and technologies out there.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I've noted, and I've discussed this with many people, is that as leaders, in our areas and in our companies, what we are finding is that uh, generative AI can be really helpful in certain tasks and be a good assistant to people. For example, if you're a developer, and writing code, it can be a good assistant to maybe accelerate that. Maybe it can generate code, generate test cases, and so on. Or if you're in marketing, it could create a copy based on some ideas that you put in there. And one of the challenges that comes from that is that we all rely on hiring. Um, Early career people who do this kind of work and train by doing that to become at the higher level, right? So one of the key things from a leadership perspective for us, and I think across the industry, is and will be, is how do we bring these assistants into the company, but at the same time nurture the talent that we have, so that just because they got a calculator now they don't know how to do a multiplication, right? That doesn't work. So we have to enable and nurture our teams so that they can take advantage of the tools, yet have the learning process that happens by doing the work, by themselves, so that they can grow into. Because ultimately, when it comes to decision making, and key strategic things. We do nurture the talent so that they can come and take on greater responsibility as they move further in their career.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point and not one that I think is talked about all that often. I think those of us that are already kind of seasoned in our careers when this comes
Yeah.
around, maybe the challenge is changing kind of our workflows and shifting our mindset when we're used to doing things a certain way, but we're also able to have a critical eye on what is kind of produced from generative AI because we know, what good looks like or what it would have looked like to create it ourselves. And so what you're surfacing is maybe something we'll continue to feel kind of more and more kind of pain around that if we don't address it over time, as like you say, the younger people in the workforce aren't getting the same kind of hands-on training, creating everything from scratch the way they would have.
Yeah, I mean, as I was mentioning earlier, right, I have 3 kids, and I feel like the learning curve for the next generation with technology or with any aspect of professional work will be slightly different. It won't be the same learning pattern and learning curve as we might have gone through in the past, but their different learning curve um, will lead them to things that they will be able to do that maybe we didn't do at that time in our jobs, or maybe invent new things or whatever. Like the opportunities or outcomes can be very fascinating eventually.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I actually have a personal story on that. My daughter, who's 8, loves ChatGPT and especially the image creation and like has had a
Uh-huh.
lot of fun with the prompting. Now we've been playing with AI song generation. And last night I was teaching her the difference between what you create within the song app itself, which is fairly basic, but then going into ChatGPT, create the lyrics you want, rework the lyrics, and then move it into the app. And even that is a different way of thinking that I wouldn't have known how to guide her on a couple years ago.
Hmm.
But it's just a very different starting point that kids have
Yep.
these days. I'm curious to ask you if we get a little bit more into kind of the customers and still kind of
Yeah.
obviously we're still in the early days right now, but you talked about bringing this to customers fairly early on. Were there any kind of surprises in what you saw from like customers that were early adopters? Any kind of interesting stories or use cases that stand out?
Yeah, I think that one of the most interesting use cases, at least from my perspective, that I've seen is that, in running a large company, there are many aspects of work that can be tedious and grunt work. And, and companies are wondering how generative AI technologies can help people doing that work, and some work is not even possible, for example. So let's say you're an investment advisor, right? And your clients come into you for investment advice. Now, the amount of information that is available out there in the world is massive, right? I mean, um, n- new companies keep coming up. They have detailed prospectuses, documents, equity research. You have data, you have all that stuff. So it's not even humanly possible to digest all that information for anybody to, give the right advice. Now, what becomes possible is now the AI can do that groundwork, surface up the key points, and then you can synthesize that and help your client, in this case as an investment advisor, right? So this is, I'm sharing as an example that we've seen out there. Now, the interesting thing or the challenges are that one aspect of generative AI, which is very interesting, is the generative part of it, which means that when we ask it a question, it tries to come up with an answer. And there's a little bit of uncertainty built into the algorithm so that it doesn't sound the same every time. It's just like talking to a human. What it means that the predictability of the answer you get will not, is sort of varies. What does it mean for somebody using this technology, right? So, asking a given question, they will get answers, and you have to really wonder if this is the right answer or not, and if the generation part sort of imagined a few things or hallucinated in doing that. Now, the more information you give to it, the better it does. So, one of the challenges that have come up is how high quality are the answers and how reliable are they? And can this tool be provided to a person to then serve a customer or not? Or is it still a little bit experimental, cannot be trusted enough to do that? And how people are now trying to take that into account when using technology. So it's almost like if you had a calculator, but it doesn't always calculate the right number, it's almost right. Would you use that to do some work? And how would you do that? And one of the approaches there has been, don't just surface up an answer, but also show a lot of information along with it. And then create a workflow or training where people are trained to say, don't take the answer as it is, take that as an input, as a raw material into your work, and then apply that. So the challenges that we have seen are coming from technology, and technology will improve. But we also now understand very well that it's about us also adapting to using technology in the right way versus blindly saying, hey, whatever answer I got, let's just send it over to somebody as investment advice, which may end up being incorrect, right?
Right, right. That's a really important point. And it's right, like you said, how to use the tool, how to think about the information that you get. Very different than, let's say, like a calculator, to go back to a simple example. You can be pretty confident that if you put the right numbers in, you're going to get the right answer. But this has is so much more complexity about what we're talking about here. So it really is a shift in mindset that needs to happen. I'm curious to ask
Yeah.
you, and I believe you work more with the larger organizations, is that right?
Correct. Mostly we have been used by enterprises, although more recently we have opened up our product for people to get on and sign up by themselves and use it. And this is a motion that we're encouraging. But
Okay.
initially, initially we focus on enterprises because the technology is complex, or the challenges are complex rather, than we wanted to build technology which is very robust. So we didn't want to build technology which is only used by small companies and is therefore not fully battle tested for the different scenarios. But having done that already, we are very much into making it more democratized and accessible.
Yep, yeah, I do love that. I'm curious if you notice any kind of major themes between what you're seeing in kind of the enterprise users versus the smaller ones, and if there's anything surprising in that.
Yeah, I think the the common themes that we see is um, more and more. I think, at least in the data side, I would say, more and more the focus is going towards outcomes. One of the things to always remember is that the data is just the means to the end. Ultimately, somebody's trying to make a business decision, or for example, our customer, like somebody like DoorDash, right? Ultimately, they're trying to deliver products to their customers in their homes, and what are we doing? What we are doing is making sure that they have the most recent data about what inventory is available in a store so that they can show it and pick it up, right? So we are more the means to the end, whether it's a large company or a small company. And I think that there has been an evolution of companies over the past 10 years, from very few companies being data driven to more and more companies sort of adopting data, but initially more as a technology and now more as the solution that they want to build. So in that evolution, I would say that the common ground I see is um, companies saying, I'm more focused on the goal. I don't have to build all the technology myself, and I can take something that is already working and is advanced to fit into that. Whereas, previously I would often see that very large enterprises would just say, well, we're a big company, we can hire people and we can go build everything by ourselves. But I think slowly that thing has shifted, where not just big and companies all across the board are more focused on the final outcomes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's very, very interesting. Taking a bit of a step back to kind of hear about your
Yeah.
own leadership. I'd love to hear, as you're leading through changes like this and in an industry that's changing quickly, how do you think about your own leadership style and kind of leading through major changes like this?
Yeah, I think I think of my role as a leader in sort of two aspects, right? One, as a startup entrepreneur, is about innovation, and the second is about scaling. So, because ultimately it's all about sort of creating unique or technologies or solutions, and then bringing that to market at scale. On the on the scaling side, it's all a people-driven thing, right? And my approach to that has always been, and it's been a learning sort of process as well, right? As the company grows, the challenges change. On the scaling side of things, it's always been about identifying high quality talent and you know learning to nurture and delegate to them, and help drive more ownership sort of mentality in the company, so that more and more people are driven to execute. Um, and that has been a change generally, I think, in corporate culture, where it was all very centralized command and control approach maybe 20 years ago, to more and more open cultures, more democratized, more, I think, uh, an environment that also facilitates and encourages innovation in companies, because ideas come from all over the place. Um, on the innovation side itself, I'm very driven by what are the key challenges and what is the technologies coming in, with the understanding that it takes time to to create innovative solutions. And innovation takes a little bit of risk as well. You have to go out there and try new things. Uh, in my experience as an entrepreneur, that risk is often overrated, but it is certainly something that gets harder as the company grows bigger. As the companies grow bigger, they have they have a product, they have an offering that works. There is more resistance to then making changes um, and building new things, right? So
Right.
my leadership style is trying to keep that balance, is keep that innovation spirit in the company, encourage that across the board, and then still enable and drive scale as we serve more customers or as we build more things and as we become more and more critical for the ecosystem that is being built in the data world.
Can you talk a little bit more about that innovative spirit? Because I think you're right. As the company, grows, it can be easier to rest on your laurels. So how do you foster that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I have been personally sort of fascinated by through my entrepreneurial journeys is an approach where I feel like ideas, do come all across, right? Almost all of us who look at something and have an idea like, oh, maybe we should do this or that. But there are relatively few people who can then take that basic spark of an idea to then detail out like, okay, how will this work eventually? And then maybe take the next step to say, well, let me build a small solution to that, like a prototype, and then sort of push forward to say, well, can it go further or not? So ideas are there all over. It's just that how do you help those ideas go from that spark all the way to a proper solution? And my own experience in that has been, as an entrepreneur, my journey was I would always keep a note of the ideas that come to mind that can happen like any time, literally in a day, and then run a process which is called an innovation tournament. So when I was in business school, one of our professors, Carl Ulrich, he actually has written a lot about this idea of an innovation tournament. It's almost like the American Idol of ideas. So the goal here is that you keep a large number of ideas and you try to flesh them out into some amount of detail. And as you do the first pass, maybe you start with like 20 ideas and you try to write details of like what will it be like, what will it work, how will it solve a problem, how much value does it create, and so on. You will realize that a set of ideas, just start to look like they're not as strong. So you eliminate them and you get to the next round of the tournament where you have a fewer ideas remaining, and then you go to more detail. And as you sort of try to compete those ideas together, you start to come up with a one or two ideas that actually are extremely valuable and powerful. And that's sort of an approach that I took myself, like trying to figure out like what do I want to work on, because as an entrepreneur you're like really investing many years of your life into one thing that you're going to pursue from that sort of initial spark all the way to trying to build a company. And that is one of the things that we've tried to do in general. Is like, how do we get ideas within the company now to surface up and come up and become something that we can pursue? It's not easy, to be honest. I feel like even in my company, we haven't done as good a job of that as we could. But that is something always in our mind to try and encourage and bring that up.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I'm curious to hear. I know at NVIDIA you're working on some innovation. It sounds like in
Mhm.
business school you got some of those frameworks as well. What are the things that you picked up from kind of earlier in your career that then have kind of shaped how you've thought about it in your current venture?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, there's been a bit of a learning journey. Um, for me, the early career, and I came into the US as an immigrant in 99, exactly 25 years ago now. And coming in here, didn't know much except knowing that, okay, I'm coming to Silicon Valley. This is where all the innovation happens. This is where I want to be, just because of my love for technology, and slowly started to figure out how this whole thing works. Coming straight out of undergrad from India, very little idea of how the real world works, right? Um, so kind of my um, sort of early days kind of own journey around this has been a little bit about seeing and observing other people. I think that, for example, being at NVIDIA, right? I was part of a small team, and our CEO Jensen at the time had a very sort of specific goal that This is year 2002, by the way, for context, right? He had a very specific goal that we make amazing, graphical processors. We are loved by gamers, but the technology has a lot of potential. How can we apply this technology to more areas? And what might those areas be? And remember, this is the pre-mobile era, but some pace of innovation had already started to happen in the world of devices and so on. Um, and I did see and learn and observe quite a bit from that. And the idea was that one, um, come up with multiple ideas and try to build something towards that. Second, I think there was tremendous patience to also say that you things will not happen in 2 or 3 months. Some of the ideas that we worked on back then, like automotive, which is a big business for NVIDIA, we knew that even if we do the design right now, it will be at least 6 to 7 years before the first car comes out in the market with that technology, because it takes 2 or 3 years to build the technology right for an automotive use case, and then the cars themselves have a 4 year cycle. So learning that the patience part of it is really important, and actually looking back at how tremendously successful NVIDIA has been, um, and almost looks like an overnight success, but having been there, it's like a what I call as a 13-year overnight success that was built there was through a lot of that patience. I think that was another part that for me was a learning experience is if you stay on it um, and have patience, you can get there. And that's what I think we have seen in technology. One of the things we say is that we sort of overestimate what we can be done in 1 or 2 years and really underestimate what can happen in 10 years. And that's why we feel like, hey, we started on this. It's been 6 months. It's been a year. Why isn't it already big? It doesn't happen that fast. And that's when I look at Gen AI right now. I think it has been had a tremendously fast trajectory in 2 years. So I can't even imagine what that 10-year trajectory would be, right? But yeah, those were some of the experiences I have. And I feel like when I look at companies that have been the most innovative, one of the common things I've seen that they have good, strong founder leadership in the company. Um, and the entrepreneur mindset of the founder who is running the company, whether it was in Amazon, whether it was NVIDIA, whether it has been um, you know um, companies like SpaceX and Tesla and so on, is a big part because innovation takes a risk, innovation takes time, it takes patience. And while the risk is often overrated, so most people look at the risk and say it's not worth doing, but entrepreneurs are ones who say it's worth doing. It'll take a long time. I have the patience to push through that and make it happen. And that's why I see that a lot of times founder-led companies actually show remarkable results over a long time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the topic of patience isn't one that comes up often enough. So I'm very interested that you brought that up. I think as you think about like larger companies that, public companies have shareholders. So you need to kind of show certain earnings. It's hard to have and a certain level of patience. If you're a smaller company, you either have investors or right, don't always have kind of high margins to give you that wiggle room. So it's hard like knowing what's right and making those investments for the future and still having to kind of manage to the day to day. So I can see where you're saying the
Yeah.
importance and the founders and leadership's role in that.
Yeah, I was just reminded of that. I was watching recently Jeff Bezos' interview at the New York Times Dealbook Summit, and they were an unprofitable company and almost made fun of for the longest time. Like they don't know how to make a profit. Not only did they end up becoming one of the biggest e-commerce company, they also built the biggest infrastructure company in Amazon Cloud. And companies to be able to do that divergent a set of things, like you're building an e-commerce store and then you end up building the biggest infrastructure company, is I think a testament to both the idea that okay, something like this can happen, and thinking not just linearly, but sometimes orthogonally as well. And then having the patience to keep investing into that, which, to my understanding, took 6 to 7 years of investment before it even got off the ground.
Wow. Wow. It's a topic we could talk about all day.
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of talk a little bit maybe about the go-to-market side of all this, right? Because you create these great innovations, but then you still need to get it out to the market. So interested to hear a little bit from your experience. What are some of those most important things to get right on the go-to-market side as you're kind of pushing out new innovations?
Yeah, I think go to market actually. So my DNA being a product, person and a product, founder, CEO, the go to market thing was something that I actually learned over time by observing and also by making mistakes. And one of the things that um, I've learned in that whole process in terms of the go to market is that the initial, technology or the innovation that you create, oftentimes I believe that the founder or the creator has to become also the salesperson of that. It has in the way that being able to now, you have something, but you got to take it to market, and market is a lot about communication through and cutting through a lot of noise and finding those early adopters who really are willing to go out of the comfort zone and try something new, and take a bet on something. And one of the and obviously, people know this very well. Probably if you have seen Crossing the Chasm or read the book Crossing the Chasm, it's all about how to get that early adopters and then going past to the mainstream of the market. What my experience has been, and advice that I give to a lot of entrepreneurs when I talk to them, is you have to be the first person to communicate what you're building, figure out what's the best way to talk about it, and then be the first person to try and sell it. Because while you are marketing the product and while you're selling it, you're actually also trying to figure out back to what your product should be and where is it missing the mark. And you're also able to understand how a buyer or a customer is going to perceive that product, and where will it have challenges. So it's something that, in the startup world, we often say is that, the first $1 million in sales, or even the first few $1 million in sales, have to be done by the founders, and then they can start to ramp up with support, with building a support team around them, creating leverage around specific actions. So, bringing in somebody who can help them get in front of more people, like somebody who will go schedule the meetings for them, but they still go do that conversation. So now they're spending less time, you know, setting up meetings, for example, and then similarly in every step of the way, finding and building the team, finding the people to create leverage around them, and building the go to market organization with that. And some of that process and DNA, I think, becomes the way a company ultimately does its overall go to market and sell. Again, going back to the NVIDIA example, a lot of it for us was, we'd build the graphical chip, build the technology, and would encourage the developers, the game developers, the publishers, to build games optimized for our technology. So we didn't go and sell the chip directly to people. We would encourage people to build games that take advantage of that, and that is what would drive the demand. And that's a very different go to market motion than maybe you're building a product and you're setting up a store, or you're giving people a trial or making it open source. So there are many go to market motions that are possible, but oftentimes the founder and the innovators and the creators are the ones who have to test and figure out what works best for what they have created.
Yeah, yeah. You're making me think of just kind of talking about the different permutations in a go to market, even the innovating how you go to market, right? That could be an innovation in and of itself. And if you kind of too quickly bring on a more kind of traditional sales role or function, you might be missing those opportunities to look at kind of what are the true needs of the customer, what are the different customer segments you can serve, and then what are the right ways to reach them, right? And sometimes those non-traditional ways, maybe your Amazon example is a great one of kind of
Yeah.
fundamentally changing the game of how people buy books and music and, all the things that Amazon brought in those early days.
Yeah, and a different go-to-market motion, I feel like, have a different cost structure to it, right? I mean, taking a piece of software and going selling to a large enterprise, having some person who does the calls, and have an expensive person at that to do that, immediately changes how much you can even price your product, right? So it completely changes everything about how a company works. Who do they sell to? How do they pitch it? What is the sales motion? What is the price of the product? And you take the same thing to a different place where you could be giving a very lightweight, low cost subscription and growing it in a very different way, right? Um, so
Yeah.
yes, I think
Yeah.
innovation in product and the go to market motion and how you build that, they all very tightly connect.
Yeah. Sure. I think a topic we've touched on in a prior discussion is really around that scaling the go-to-market and what that looks like kind of pre and post funding. So not just kind of building out that first sales org, but once a venture has reached a certain place and they have outside investors and all of a sudden money is not necessarily the biggest problem. Kind of
Yeah.
what do you see differently there? What are the gotchas?
Yeah, I think that's a very common thing with startups is that you get a working product, you get investor interest, you raise a bunch of money, and then immediately it's like, let's go sell, sell, sell. And this is a mistake I feel like entrepreneurs do make oftentimes, which is the first intuition then is to hire people who can sell, hire people who can market. Um, but the challenge oftentimes is that the question that often gets missed, for example, is that are you ready to scale yet? And what is that go to market motion going to be like? Um, and there are many stories of, trying to go fast without having figured that out, spending or burning through a lot of money, and then realizing that maybe the approach wasn't correct, right? Um, and um, Oftentimes, at least my oftentimes what I have seen is that these are expensive mistakes that can be hard to recover from. Now, if you remember, like 3, 4 years ago, money was very, very easy to get, and companies were getting like, you know, 20, 50, $100 million rounds at high valuations done. So they would take that money. Now you have a lot of money to go execute, and you can hire a team and you can try to go scale that. When the market correction started to happen around valuation, one of the challenges with the companies was, wait a minute, if my valuation is $1 billion, I have to build at least $100 million revenue of business. But these were companies that had, barely 1 or 2 million in revenue. So then now they have a long way to go with no other funding that can come because nobody will fund them, unless they grow to that scale, or they will have to take a cut in their valuation, which is even more painful. Um, so one of the lessons that came out of that, and I think we always look at good times and assume they will always be there. The hard times are the ones that teach the most valuable lessons. The lessons that came out of that was, okay, let's be disciplined. Let's look towards how the company can be profitable. That word was almost taboo until a few years ago, right? And now everybody talks about being cash flow positive. Um, so, how do we take that capital, spend a little bit of it to solve the next risk? So startups are all about solving a series of risks. Initially, a risk is, hey, can you even solve this problem? Can you even build the technology? Then it's like, okay, can you take this to some customers? Well, and then it's like, is the market big enough to scale it and have many people selling it and growing all of that, right? So it's all about a set of risks that you have to work through. And when people try to jump 1 or 2 steps ahead, sometimes you get pulled back into reality and have to pay your debts through that and redo the work that should have happened then. And I think there's definitely something to watch for. My first startup that I was involved in was in the year 2000. I joined as a first employee at a just out of the gate Series A company, and we had raised a $3 million Series A. That was the Series A at the time. And a month later, the dot-com crash happened. And the next 1 year were a lot of painful lessons for us in figuring out, how to build the business. And I'll say some of that has stuck with me forever to remember that, you know, um, there is always a cycle that comes.
Yeah, yeah, of course. It sounds a little bit like, careful what you wish for, right? And just needing to making sure that you're making those right decisions, at a time where you're also feeling the pressure to move really quickly. I know made me think of an example with a client we worked with. It was a few years ago now, but
Mhm.
they just got their Series A funding, prior to working with us, and they had, um, wanted to quickly kind of ramp up on the marketing side. So they hired their digital marketing lead. They hired a director that was very strong in digital so they could do, right, paid media and SEO and all of those things, and we're not really getting the traction they were looking for. Turned out really, speaking of your comment about the early adopters, it was not as easy to reach that market at scale, once they were reaching, kind of the majority, and really needed more of a channel approach. So then,
Yeah.
all the people that they had hired, it wasn't the right people. So when we came in, it was really like reworking the organization to be more of a channel model. And how do you enable the sales team, and how do you kind of co-market, with partners and enable the partners and all of that. And so that can be very costly, both, the people's time. You have people's livelihoods on the line, all the time that you're
Yeah.
losing through that process. So again, really thinking, being kind of thoughtful and deliberate in those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, having built an ad tech company myself before, one of the things, I've learned is that it's very easy to spend a lot of money in advertising and try to immediately build that engine. If we spend this much money, we'll get this many leads, we'll get, you know, but if you haven't really done that homework at a smaller scale and you haven't proven that to work at a smaller scale, um, the money that you spend never comes back. And it can be a very expensive lesson to learn. And it's just like I tell my kids, you got to do your homework and, go step by step. You can't just jump ahead in the process and skip the key steps. The same thing with go to market is, really figure out that product market fit. Is your um, product at a point where there's a market fit where it can be sold at scale, where you can train people how to do that, then go through that process, actually training a few people and wrapping that up before can really scale. So sometimes time is that's why I said it's a game of patience because if you give it the right amount of time, sometimes markets come to you sometimes a little bit too early with that idea. And yes, there are a few early adopters, but the mass market is not yet ready for it. And but in a few years they will be. Um, and then you're in the right place at the right time.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, Saket, you're clearly a wealth of leadership experience, and I know it's come from your own experience throughout your career. I'd love to ask you maybe a bit more of an introspective question as we wrap up here today, and really like thinking, knowing what you know now, like what advice would you have given your younger self when you were kind of first getting started in leadership roles?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. Is like if I could go back and give some advice. Um, I think that one of the things, again, that's might be unique to me coming again as an immigrant experience, kind of getting assimilated in the country and the culture and figuring out, a very, complicated Silicon Valley ecosystem. One advice I'd be giving myself was to put myself more out there. Sometimes, you feel like you're not ready. I need to do this one more thing to be ready for that opportunity. And that's not true just for entrepreneurs. For many times people are like, all I need to is to get this certification or do this course and then I can do this job. And sometimes I feel like in hindsight is like you were probably ready for it. So put yourself out there a bit more and take on that a little bit of risk in trying that, and maybe you're ready for it. And I saw that with people around me and say, wow, I'm so impressed this person has been able to accomplish so much so quickly. And I feel like the lesson I've taken from that is, there's when it comes to entrepreneurship, for example, there's never a good time, and it's always a good time in the sense that if you want your life to be in that perfect state where, yes, now I'm ready to take some risk and start a company, you might never get to that exact spot. Sometimes, it's personal life, or sometimes it's, maybe it's kids and what they are doing. And therefore, it will never be a good time. But then it's always a good time whenever you start. We figure out and we find the way with whatever we have and find the time and the resources to get to the outcomes we are looking for. So I think that's kind of my advice to myself is like, you know take that step forward or put yourself out there.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure that'll resonate with a lot of our listeners. And I think what you just said at the end of there's never a good time and always a good time, it's spot on. And you just made me think of uh, one person in particular that I think I'm going to take this episode and
Uh-huh.
send it their way, that I think it'll push them in a certain direction. So thank you for that. And, thank you for so much of what you shared today. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So if people want to reach out to you to connect, what's the best way to get in touch with you or your organization?
Yeah, I'm personally very active on LinkedIn and easy to find, and very responsive as well. So welcome anybody to come and connect with me there. My company is called Nexla, nexla.com. Very easy to find us as well. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a great conversation. Um, and if any of your audience want to reach out with questions, maybe specifically deeper on technology, other parts, I'm more than happy to chat with folks.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you to everyone listening. I know I loved hearing so much of what Saket shared and the discussion around patience and innovation, how to create that right culture for that innovation and ownership in the organization. So if today's episode gave you or listeners any valuable insights, and I am very sure that it did, please share this with someone. Spreading this kind of knowledge and information helps each of us grow as leaders and really helps us all drive successful innovation and transformation in our organization. Thanks again, Saket.
Thank you, Nat.
This has been another great episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.